So you probably can't tell us some of the stories, but I can't believe it was an easy sell.
No, it wasn't.
So,
Although,
so how did it happen?
well, I tell you that the interesting thing was, and I put out my first Dear Colleague letter. A member of Congress puts out a Dear Colleague and says, look, I'm putting in this bill, and here's reasons why. Would you join me in it? And I remember the first one I put out on the ADA. And it went out, and the very next day, I would have members of Congress come up to me, and liberals, conservatives, Republicans, Democrats, male, female, it didn't make any difference, come up to me, and they would say, Tony, I just got your Dear Colleague letter on that disabilities bill you're putting in. Put me down. My mother, my father, my sister, my brother, my wife, my husband, my neighbor, whatever, I don't like the way they're treated, and I want to help you. It was, I was fascinated. I expected some of it, but not as much as I got. And if they had read the bill, they wouldn't have been supportive. But they
Thank goodness they don't do that.
Because it was a very, very tough bill. But they really came through. It was really amazing. And so I had a lot of co-sponsors. But as we went through the process, the leadership, both the Democratic and Republican leadership in the House, people that you would not expect, were opposed to it. They felt it was too broad, it would be too aggressive, and people would be, the public would be opposed to it. And I had to fight them on that. And we pushed ahead, and they made us go through 15 different subcommittees, and that's so unusual.
Yeah, very unusual.
And they made us go through every hoop. We got through the Transportation Committee by 1 vote. But we went through 5 different full committees and 15 subcommittees in the House of Representatives in order to get it done. But we got it done. We kept pushing and pushing and pushing, and we got it done. And when we brought it to the House floor, we got it through by an overwhelming vote. And we went to the Senate floor, we got it through by an overwhelming vote. But in the committee process, they really pushed us hard and tried to stop us. The Greyhound bus, somebody may hear from Greyhound bus, I don't care. But Greyhound bus was the worst. They spent a lot of money trying to stop us. And we had to compromise on motor bus owners, to my chagrin. But we compromised and gave them something like 20 years to comply with the law. And that was the worst that we had to do. But basically, I said that once the law was passed, that you would have buses start dancing. And what I meant by that was that the buses, when we signed the bill in 1990, at that point, you didn't have buses that dipped. You didn't have buses that did all kinds of things to make access easy. But that once the bill was signed, people would start realizing there was a market for that. And the technology would come about. As Richard said at one point, technology will come to you if the requirement is there. And so these buses now, you've seen them, the buses dip down and they let the chairs get on and so forth. I mean, the technology is there because the law is there. And so by passing the ADA, you've made a lot of things happen. And that was, I think, exciting, but it could have happened 10, 15 years sooner, unfortunately.
And the president, who was president at the time, who's actually signed the bill at the White House, was President George Bush Sr., and he signed it on July 26th, 1990. I suspect you were there.
Yes.
My question to you is, when you left the ceremony and all that you had to go through to get the bill signed, now it's signed, you go home that night, you rest your head on the pillow, what'd you think?
Well, the very first thing, and you'd be surprised, I said, Bob Hope was right. I realized just how important this was. And it's interesting today, this is the law of the land now, in 52 different countries, not just the United States. And I think we sometimes take a lot of it for granted. You go out to the street corner here, and you look at the curb cuts, and you'll see some of you here in wheelchairs, you'll use the curb cuts. But if you look at the curb cuts. Those of you in wheelchairs are a minority that use the curb cuts. It's delivery men and women who use the curb cuts. It's the elderly use the curb cuts. It's kids in roller blades and roller skates and all these other things that they have nowadays use the curb cuts. But the accommodations for those of us with disabilities have now become things that everybody in society uses for their own needs and so forth. And that's great. I love it. But the impact that ADA has had on society in general is tremendous. But I remember that Bob Hope said that you can do things that will impact millions of people, and that has happened. And I always give him credit for what he advocated.
So great, July 20th, 1990, the bill is signed, ADA is here, so we don't have to do anything else, right?
Unfortunately, that's not the case.
So what's ahead for us?
One of my pet peeves, before you go there, one of my pet peeves is that the Supremes, now the Supremes in my parlance are the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided takes about 10 years for legal cases to eventually get to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court decided that Congress did not mean to cover certain disabilities.